The glass fell before I even realized my hand was shaking. I wasn't drunk, though I wish I'd had that excuse. It shattered against the ballroom floor, the sound cutting through the chatter and music like a gunshot. For a moment, everyone turned to look at me, the quiet, harmless guy who couldn't even hold a drink. I muttered something about slippery fingers, but I knew why it happened. It was because of her. I saw her across the room, her hand on his shoulder, leaning in close enough to whisper something in his ear. I told myself it was nothing. Lila always laughs too loudly, talks too closely, but this time, her smile looked different. Not the smile she gives me when she's humoring my bad jokes. No, this was the kind of smile you give when you forget your husband is standing just 20 feet away. The rest of the room blurred. It was as if the corporate event, the cheesy DJ, the warm champagne, the fake compliments, just faded into background noise. I was no longer Edgar, the guy who came here with his wife. I was the guy who just realized he might be the punchline of some cruel joke. I picked up the pieces of that broken glass, my fingers trembling, not caring if I cut myself. It wasn't the glass that hurt. It was watching her, watching them. Something inside me cracked like that glass, but no one seemed to notice. Later that night, she walked toward me, her face flushed from laughter, or maybe from something I didn't want to imagine. She reached for my arm, her touch soft but cold, like she was trying to comfort me without knowing why I needed comforting. And that's when I leaned close and whispered, "Not after." Her eyes widened. She looked at me like I'd just spoken a language she couldn't understand. But I understood. I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, decide when I'd be discarded, when I'd be the fool standing in the dark. Not after this night. Not after what I saw. That was the moment everything began to unravel. After I whispered, "Not after," she just stared at me, her lips parting as if she was about to say something but decided against it. The moment hung between us like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile people give when they're trying to pretend nothing is wrong, and said, "What's that supposed to mean, Edgar?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I didn't know. All I knew was that something felt wrong, so wrong that my instincts screamed louder than my thoughts. The rest of the night was a blur of forced laughter and polite nods. I watched Lila dance with my coworkers, watched Damien's hands hover too close to her waist, and each time I looked away, I felt like I was swallowing shards of glass. I tried to join in the conversation at our table, but my words felt heavy, like I was speaking through wet cement. My boss was talking about quarterly projections, someone else was telling a story about a disastrous client meeting, but none of it reached me. My eyes were on her, always on her. When the event ended and we walked to the car, she seemed lighter, almost glowing, like the night had given her something it had stolen from me. In the silence of the car ride home, I kept replaying that moment, her hand reaching for mine, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. I thought about my whisper, about how unplanned it was, and how it felt like it came from some deeper place inside me, a warning or a plea I didn't even understand yet. Once we got home, Lila went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the faint scratches on my palm from the broken glass. I wanted to ask her what she was laughing about with Damien, why she kept leaning in so close to him, why she didn't once look for me while we were there. But I didn't. I'm not that guy. I've never been the guy who demands answers, who accuses or fights. I'm the guy who waits, who hopes I'm just imagining things. But later that night, as she slept, I couldn't shake it. I couldn't shake the thought that the woman lying next to me wasn't really with me anymore. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen glowing faintly as it charged. I stared at it like it was some locked door I was too scared to open. And then it buzzed. A single message. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move. I just stared at the notification lighting up the room like a warning sign. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might wake her. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't imagining anything. Something was happening. Something was slipping through my fingers. I whispered into the darkness, barely a breath, "Not after," as if saying it again would somehow stop what was coming. I didn't touch her phone that night, but I memorized the way that notification looked on the screen, just a name I didn't recognize, and a single line that made my stomach twist, still thinking about tonight. It could have been about anything, right? A joke, a conversation, maybe even some harmless remark. But the words felt heavy, like they were meant to be whispered, like they carried a secret I wasn't meant to hear. I lay there, stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling, listening to Lila's slow breathing beside me. My mind was a carousel of ugly thoughts, each one spinning faster than the last. In the morning, I tried to act normal. I made coffee. I asked about her day. I kissed her on the cheek, but she barely seemed to notice. She was scrolling through her phone, her expression unreadable, smiling every now and then at something she wasn't telling me about. Every time she typed something, I felt this tightening in my chest, like I was watching a scene through a window that I was never meant to look through. I wanted to confront her right there. I wanted to ask, who sent that message? Who are you thinking about? But I didn't. Instead, I nodded like a fool when she said she was meeting friends that evening. Friends I'd never met. Friends who apparently didn't care if she came home at midnight, smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize. That night, I sat alone in our living room, the TV on mute, my phone in my hand, but useless. I scrolled aimlessly, pretending to be distracted, but all I could think about was her phone. I imagined the messages she might be getting, the little secrets I wasn't part of. I imagined her laughing at something Damien had said, his words lighting up her screen the way they lit up her face at that corporate event. By 11:45 p.m., I started pacing. Every creak of the floor felt like my own heartbeat, too loud, too revealing. I thought about texting her, but what would I even say? Are you with him? I hated how desperate I sounded even in my own head. When she finally came home, she looked radiant. Not tired, not drained from an evening with friends. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly messy like she'd been caught in the wind or someone's hands. I asked her how her night was, trying to keep my voice steady, but she just smiled and said, "It was fine, Edgar. You worry too much." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that message, about how easily she brushed me off. Around 3 a.m., I got up, walked into the kitchen, and stared at the shattered glass I'd thrown into the trash the night before. That broken glass felt like me. Sharp edges, useless pieces, no way of putting it back together. Something in me decided then that I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. The next morning felt like a scene from someone else's life. Lila was humming in the kitchen, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, wearing that oversized sweater I bought her last winter. It was the kind of ordinary morning that should have felt safe, comforting even, but it felt wrong. Everything felt staged, like she was playing the part of the loving wife while hiding a script I wasn't allowed to read. My chest ached with questions I didn't have the courage to ask out loud. I spent the day obsessing. While she was at work, I sat at my desk pretending to answer emails, but my mind kept replaying that message I saw on her phone. Still thinking about tonight. It burned into my brain like acid. Who was that from? What did they mean? And most of all, why hadn't I demanded an explanation when I had the chance? I told myself I trusted her, but that wasn't true anymore. Not after that night at the corporate event. Not after the way she looked at Damien like I was a ghost standing right beside her. By evening, my resolve cracked. I'd never been the kind of man to snoop. I always thought it was pathetic, something insecure people did when they couldn't face reality. But reality was slipping through my fingers anyway, and I couldn't just sit there and watch. So, when she went to take a shower, I did something I'm still ashamed to admit. I picked up her phone. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. My heart was pounding, every beat louder than the last, like my body was warning me not to do this. But I ignored it. I opened her messages. At first, it was all normal. Chats with her friends, a few work messages. Then I saw the name. Damien. The conversation wasn't long, but it was enough to punch the air out of my lungs. It wasn't outright romantic or scandalous. It was worse than that. It was subtle, teasing, familiar. Like two people who shared a secret language. "Last night was fun," he'd written. "You looked amazing." She'd replied with nothing more than a smiley face, and a "you always know how to make me laugh." I stared at those words like they were a confession written in fire. I put the phone back exactly how I found it, my hands sweaty and cold at the same time. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the water running in the shower, wondering how long I could keep pretending I didn't know what I now knew. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, smiling at me like nothing was wrong, I felt sick. I forced myself to smile back, but inside I was unraveling. I wanted to scream, to demand she tell me the truth. Instead, I muttered something about being tired and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense, waiting for some kind of clarity that never came. I whispered, "Not after again," like some pathetic mantra, as if saying it would make me stronger, as if it would make this nightmare go away. But it didn't. It just made me realize how much I was slipping into a version of myself I didn't recognize. A man who was too afraid to face the truth, but too broken to ignore it. That night, I decided I wouldn't ask her. I would watch. I would listen. And if there was something to be found, I would find it, even if it tore me apart. The next week felt like living in a stranger's home. Lila was the same on the surface, bright, chatty, humming while she made breakfast. But something in me had shifted so drastically that every normal moment felt staged. I would catch her smiling at her phone, and my chest would tighten like someone was twisting a rope around my ribs. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who accuses without proof. But I also couldn't sit by anymore and watch my life crumble while pretending everything was fine. I started small. I noticed her patterns, when she went to the gym, which evenings she said she was meeting friends, how long her showers lasted while she texted behind a locked bathroom door. I hated myself for paying attention to these things, for becoming this guy, but I couldn't stop. It was like every fiber of my being had turned into a radar, tuned into her movements. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. It was Thursday. She said she was going to dinner with Jess, her old college friend. I knew Jess. Jess lived across town, and Lila rarely saw her because of work schedules. My gut told me this wasn't dinner with Jess. So, an hour after she left, I got in my car and drove. I felt ridiculous, like I was starring in some low-budget detective movie, but I couldn't shake the image of Damien leaning in, whispering to her the same way she used to whisper to me. She wasn't at the restaurant Jess loved, the one with the string lights and the patio. Instead, I found her car parked outside a quiet little wine bar on the other side of town. I sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. Through the front window of the bar, I saw her. She was sitting at a corner table, and across from her, laughing at something she'd said, was Damien. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, frozen, watching them. It wasn't what they did. It was how they looked at each other. That unspoken ease, like they were in their own world. She touched her necklace again, the same way she did at the corporate event, and he leaned in, grinning. It was subtle, but I saw it. I saw everything. I drove home before she could catch me watching. I sat in the driveway for what felt like hours, the engine off, the silence deafening. By the time she came home, I had already rehearsed my fake smile. I asked her how her dinner with Jess was. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It was nice. We had a lot to catch up on." I nodded, like an idiot. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed the entire scene in my head, over and over, until I could barely breathe. But instead of confronting her, I did something even worse. I started digging. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked her laptop. She was logged into her email, and I told myself I'd only look for one thing, just one. I found a thread of messages between her and Damien, carefully labeled under a work project name, but the tone wasn't professional. It was friendly. Too friendly. Words like "last night was perfect" and "can't stop thinking about that laugh" burned into my memory like acid. I closed the laptop before I saw more. I couldn't take it, but I also couldn't stop. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a quiet, relentless storm, and I knew I was only at the edge of it. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The quiet, dependable Edgar, the man who always trusted too much, was gone. In his place was someone who stayed awake until dawn, someone who replayed every moment of the past month like a detective piecing together evidence from a crime scene. I stopped eating properly. I stopped focusing at work. Every thought I had was a question about her. Where she was, who she was with, what words were being sent across glowing screens I wasn't allowed to see. The worst part was how normal she acted. It was like she was rehearsing her lines for a play I was never invited to. She'd kiss my cheek in the morning, say, "I love you," without even looking up from her phone, and I'd mutter it back, feeling like I was saying those words into a void. That Friday evening, she said she had a work dinner. I almost laughed when I heard it. It was so rehearsed, so casual. Work dinner. Sure. My gut told me this was my chance. This time, I wasn't just going to follow her. I was going to know. I waited until she left, then grabbed my jacket and keys. My hands were trembling again, but there was no turning back. I parked down the street from where she said she'd be, but she wasn't there. My heart hammered as I checked other places nearby, every second feeling like my brain was on fire. And then, I saw her car parked 2 blocks away, outside a dimly lit hotel restaurant. My stomach dropped. I knew this was it, the kind of moment where you can't go back to being who you were before. I slipped inside, keeping my head down. The restaurant was quiet, low lights, couples talking in hushed tones. And there they were, Lila and Damien, sitting in a booth near the back, leaning in so close, their heads almost touched. They weren't holding hands, not openly, but there was something intimate in the way they looked at each other, like the rest of the world didn't exist. I felt my knees go weak. For a moment, I thought I might just walk out, drive home, and never speak a word about it. Pretend I hadn't seen it. Pretend my marriage wasn't crumbling in front of my eyes. But then I saw her laugh, this bright, unguarded laugh she hadn't given me in months. And that was the breaking point. I couldn't take it. I left before they saw me, heart pounding, chest tight. I drove around aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring past as I tried to swallow this pain that felt too big for my body. I hated myself for not going in there, for not confronting her, for just leaving. But I also knew that if I had, I would have said things I could never take back. When she came home later that night, she smelled faintly of wine and something floral, something expensive that wasn't hers. I asked her how the work dinner went. She smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "It was fine." Just like that. A single lie, delivered like it was the most natural thing in the world. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just sat in the dark living room, staring at the glow of the streetlights outside, whispering to myself, "Not after." It wasn't just a phrase anymore, it was a promise. Not after this night. Not after what I'd seen. Something had to change, even if it meant tearing everything apart. I woke up the next morning, or maybe I never really slept, feeling like I had swallowed fire. My head was pounding, my throat dry, and the image of Lila and Damien sitting in that booth kept replaying in my mind like some cruel loop I couldn't turn off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her leaning in, her smile soft in a way that used to be mine. By sunrise, I knew I couldn't keep this inside anymore. If I didn't say something, I was going to explode. When she walked into the kitchen, her hair still damp from the shower, looking effortlessly beautiful, I almost lost my nerve. There was something so normal about her pouring coffee, humming to herself, that I questioned my own reality. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was just having dinner with a coworker. But then I remembered the messages I'd read, the way she looked at her phone like it was holding a secret I wasn't meant to see, and that anger, that raw heat in my chest, came flooding back. "Lila," I said, my voice cracking more than I wanted. She glanced at me, mug in hand. "Yeah. Where were you last night?" I asked. It wasn't meant to come out as a challenge, but it did. She froze, just for a second, but I saw it. The way her eyes flickered, the tiny pause before she answered. "I told you. Work dinner." I stared at her, feeling my hands clench into fists at my sides. "Don't lie to me," I said, quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Please. Not after." I stopped myself, the words caught in my throat. I didn't even know how to finish that sentence without sounding like a broken man. She set down the mug slowly, her face shifting from calm to something sharper, something I'd never seen before. "Edgar, what's going on with you? You've been different. Paranoid. Are you checking up on me now?" That last part cut deep because it was true. I felt exposed, like she had just torn away the thin mask I'd been hiding behind. "I saw you, Lila. I saw you with him." My voice cracked, and I hated myself for how desperate I sounded. "You were at that hotel restaurant with Damien. Don't deny it." For a moment, she just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, softly, bitterly, and shook her head. "Are you serious? You followed me. Do you even hear yourself right now?" Her laughter felt like a slap. I didn't know if it was because she was guilty or because she genuinely thought I was losing my mind. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and no matter what I said next, I was going to fall. She walked past me, grabbing her bag. "I can't do this right now," she muttered. "You're acting insane. Maybe take a day to think about what you're accusing me of." And just like that, she was gone, the front door slamming behind her, leaving me standing in the kitchen like some pathetic ghost. I spent the entire day replaying that conversation, every word, every pause. Was I wrong? Was I really imagining all of this? But every time doubt crept in, I saw them again, her and Damien, laughing, leaning in close. No, I wasn't crazy. Something was happening, and she wasn't going to tell me the truth. That night, I made a decision. If she wasn't going to tell me, I would find out myself. I didn't care how far I had to go. I didn't care if I broke something that could never be fixed. When Lila left that morning after our confrontation, I thought I'd lost her. The apartment felt emptier than it had in years, and I sat there for hours, staring at the wall, replaying every word we'd said, every second of that night at the restaurant. My chest felt heavy, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. By noon, I realized I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep living in this half-shadowed world of suspicion and silence. I had to talk to her, really talk to her, or we were done. I called her. My hands were shaking as I held the phone to my ear, expecting her to let it ring out, but she answered on the second ring. Her voice was soft, tired. "Edgar, we need to talk, don't we?" "Yes," I said, barely able to get the word out. She came home that evening, and we sat on the couch, not saying anything at first. I was ready to break down, to admit everything I'd done, checking her messages, following her, letting paranoia eat me alive. Before I could speak, she took my hand. "I know what you think you saw," she said. "I know it looked bad. But Damien, Edgar, he's not what you think." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I stopped myself. She looked serious, almost hurt. "Then explain it," I said quietly. She told me everything. Damien had been helping her plan something behind my back, but not the betrayal I'd imagined. It was a surprise party. For me. My birthday was in 2 weeks, and she'd been working with a few of my coworkers to make it perfect. The hotel restaurant I saw them in was the planned venue. The messages I'd read were about the event, her laughing about ideas, thanking him for helping her set it all up. "I wanted to do something big this year," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I wanted to make you feel celebrated, Edgar. Not this." I sat there stunned, my mind struggling to catch up. All the nights I spent spiraling in my own head, all the whispers of "not after" that I'd repeated like a curse. It was all my fear talking, not reality. I felt like the smallest man alive, ashamed of what I'd become these past few weeks. I told her everything. About following her, reading her messages, letting jealousy and paranoia turn me into someone I didn't even recognize. I expected her to scream at me, maybe even leave. But she didn't. She just listened, quietly, holding my hand the whole time. When I finished, she wiped a tear from my cheek and said, "Then let's start over, Edgar. No more secrets. No more shadows." Something broke in me then, but in the best way possible. I felt the weight lift off my chest, replaced by a warmth I hadn't felt in months. That night, we talked for hours, really talked. About us, about our fears, about the ways we'd stopped seeing each other in the chaos of everyday life. It was raw, it was painful, but it was real. The surprise party still happened 2 weeks later, and yes, Damien was there. We laughed about how awkward it all was, and for the first time, I felt no bitterness toward him. Because I knew now, it was never about him. It was about me learning to trust again, to stop letting my insecurities write stories that didn't exist. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my wife back. Or maybe I just found my way back to her. Either way, the whisper that haunted me, "not after," became something else. A promise. Not after this moment, not after this night, would I ever take her for granted again.